So, we've been getting more and more information about the DCU's Lanterns as it officially starts production. I love the Green Lantern character, whether it be Hal Jordan, John Stewart, or the others who've taken on the mantle. The mythology of that world is so rich that it essentially fills an entire universe of its own that we've barely even scratched the surface of in adaptations. But as hopeful as I am for the series and the creative team behind it, I also have a lot of concerns. This series is the first time that the Green Lantern mythos is being adapted to live action in nearly 15 years. And the character has basically become a bit of a laughingstock thanks entirely to the 2011 movie. And so there's a lot riding on the show to do him and his mythos justice. And so this is what I want from the DCU's Green Lantern. Although honestly, all you gotta do is throw in a billionaire with a bow and arrow and a goatee, have them go on a little road trip together, and I am sold. Hey, what can I say? I'm a simple man, I'm very easy to please. This video is brought to you by Encore. The world of buying comics physically can get kind of challenging, especially with some more classic books, but Encore is a marketplace for comics, trading cards, and other collectibles that emphasizes trust, community, and entertainment. It's kind of like TikTok, but for collecting, if that makes sense. Sellers will post 30 to 60 second clips of whatever they're selling, like comics or cards or figures, and those are either as a buy now listing or as an auction that can last from 7 minutes to 7 days. A lot of sellers actually share stories and knowledge about what they're selling, so you're not just shopping, but you're discovering a little bit of comic history. And for some of the rare items, the auctions and bidding wars can get kind of crazy. You can even trash talk in chat, and don't worry, Encore takes trust and safety seriously. All their sellers are ID verified, and the Encore guarantee protects you when your item isn't quite what you were expecting. They have fantastic customer service, so don't be surprised if you win an auction and the seller messages you to say thank you and let you know you're in good hands. The app has a ton of completely free giveaways, including even free shipping, and once you enter one, you get 5 extra invites for a friend that you invite, which is pentupling your chances of it. Is that the word? Pentupling? Whatever it is, that's what you're doing. Use my link to download Encore on iOS and Android and start collecting today. Thanks to Encore for sponsoring this video, and thanks to my patrons and channel members who help make these videos possible for just $1 a month. Back in the early 2000s, it was a great time to be a Green Lantern fan. John Stewart was becoming a household name with the DCAU. We were in a legendary run with the comics with Jeff Johns at the helm. And in general, the character was being positioned by DC as the next premier level hero. But then all of that changed in 2011 with the release of Green Lantern starring Ryan Reynolds. I'm gonna be honest, I wish I could sit here and say that the hate for this movie is unwarranted. That was actually secretly good or an underrated masterpiece that was just ahead of its time. But no, yeah, this movie's not great. The acting is bad, the villain is lame, they turn Parallax into a big cloud, the CGI costume looks terrible, it follows the cliche superhero formula beat for beat, yada yada yada, you've heard it all before. All in all, it's just not a great time. But is it the worst movie that's ever been made ever in the history of the world? I think especially nowadays, when we've gotten so many bad superhero movies in recent years, like Morbius or Quantumania or The Flash and Black Adam, that all have a lot of the same, if not more, issues. By comparison, Green Lantern just kind of fades away. It's not offensively bad like The Flash and its weird AI-generated zombies, and it's not hilariously bad like Madam Web or Catwoman, which are genuinely really fun viewing experiences.
Where's my spider? They took my spider.
It's just kind of boring. Like a lot of movies, the majority of issues came from studio meddling. And not to mention, there are still some pretty cool aspects, like Michael Clark Duncan as Kilowog or Mark Strong as Sinestro, which are both pretty fantastic castings. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on the movie itself, I have an exclusive video for the amazing tier of my Patreon and channel members where I talk more about it in depth. To me, the worst part of it is easily Ryan Reynolds as Hal. I think Hal Jordan is a character who requires a lot of sincerity, and Reynolds' approach of half-ass smarminess that he brings to literally every role doesn't really work for that. Honestly, if everything about the movie had stayed the same, even the CGI costume, but they had instead cast someone like a Chris Pine or a younger Nathan Fillion who could better embody the character, I don't think people would look back on this movie with nearly the same level of vitriol. And vitriol feels like the understatement of the year, because after the movie, Green Lantern's reputation was basically sent right down the toilet, through all the shit and the garbage, and is now sitting in a wet, stinky hole in the ground somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. In no small part because of Ryan Reynolds himself constantly making jokes about it. Green Lantern for the past 15 years has basically become a low-effort punching bag. And not just specifically the movie or even just Hal Jordan, but anything and everything Green Lantern related. It's really no different than the constant jokes about Aquaman in the 2010s before his movie came out, made $1 billion, and showed everyone that he's actually really cool. But DC hasn't wanted to touch Green Lantern with a 10-foot pole. He used to have an amazing animated series, but because of the response to the movie and toy sales, it was canceled after its 2nd season. Green Lantern was completely avoided for the entire DCEU except for this one little freaky guy and a deleted scene from the Snyder Cut, because WB wouldn't even let Snyder use him in the Snyder Cut. There have been a bunch of attempts behind the scenes to bring him in, either with another movie movie or an HBO show, but that all stayed stuck in development hell for years. The CW decided to slap the name Stewart onto one of their OCs and pretend he'd been Green Lantern the whole time, then tried to give him a spinoff, and even that failed. That was a weird decision, by the way. John Diggle was cool on his own. They introduced him in the comics like a couple years later. He was cool already. Why did we do that? Honestly, the biggest success to the Green Lantern mantle we've had lately has been Jessica Cruz. Like with DC Superhero Girls, Super Pets, and now she's getting her own show set in the My Adventures with Superman universe. There's now going to be a whole generation of people who see Jessica as the main Green Lantern purely because she's the only one who's gotten any adaptations, which is great news for me because she's my favorite Green Lantern. So I'm good. I'm chilling. I'm doing great. I'm having a time of my life. But Hal Jordan, especially a founding member of the Justice League and such an iconic and important character of the DC universe, feels like he's been essentially blacklisted from anything and everything outside of the comics. And not even for the reason he probably should be. Which is why there's so much writing on this new show. Because honestly, if this fails, I don't think we'll ever hear the phrase "in brightest day" again for the next 30 years. The pitch for the show is essentially True Detective but Green Lantern. Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart are going to be working together in unraveling a mystery set mostly on Earth in a more grounded style. I have nothing against the True Detective angle. Realistically, it's just a way to say, hey, remember this thing that was cool? It's kind of like that. But I do worry that DC's live action shows might focus too much on mimicking something else instead of what already makes these characters great. Like how The Penguin, a show that I love and adore, don't get me wrong, was basically The Sopranos but Batman, and yet barely mentioned Batman. And I have a similar worry about Paradise Lost, which is Game of Thrones but Wonder Woman. Especially because where the fuck is Wonder Woman? Come on, I need something. Give me anything, please. I don't want all of DC's TV to just be inspired by existing shows and instead take inspiration from the literal decades of source material that's right in front of them. And while I think in a vacuum the pitch for the show sounds like it could be really fun, I worry that it might be overcorrecting a little bit too hard in comparison to the movie. Similar to how after all the silliness of Batman and Robin, DC has made it its mission to only let Batman stories be realistic and ignore any supernatural elements from the source material. A topic I have a whole separate video on, and people were very nice to me in the comments. Where the Green Lantern movie was super bright and colorful and forgot about the space cop angle, this seems like it might be going too far in the opposite direction, entirely forgetting about the fun cosmic superhero stuff that's still an integral part to Green Lantern. Even the concept of grounded Green Lantern on Earth just feels weird. Ever since the 1980s, Green Lantern is a character who famously isn't really on Earth all too much. It's really only every once in a while or for Justice League stuff. I mean, his hometown was straight up wiped from the map for a decade. With a couple exceptions because now there are so many Green Lanterns and so more of them are spending more time on Earth, the rest is on crazy distant alien planets or dealing with stuff on Oa. It's quite literally the main driving conflict with his love life, that he's basically never there. There have definitely been some Earth-based Green Lantern stories, like a lot of the classic stuff, Sam Humphries and Robson Rocha's run on Green Lanterns, with Jessica and Simon, which is my favorite, and the most notable being Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams' legendary run with Hard Traveling Heroes, in which Green Arrow took Hal on a road trip to show him how the people on the ground struggled and help him remember what he was fighting for. It's one of the most impactful and important comics ever made. It literally introduced Jon Stewart and added so much depth to both Green Lantern and Green Arrow. They could very much pull from that run, just swap out Ollie with John, but don't do that. For me, James, please don't do that. With how integral Oliver is to not just that run's story, but also the social issues that run addressed and the reason why it's so legendary, I think it would be a disservice to take him out of it and try to replicate that with two grounded space cops trying to solve a murder. And this pitch just throws a wrench into what the expectations are for the show. Will we get any of the silly space stuff? How much will they realistically use their rings? Will we see the huge cast of aliens that make the Green Lantern mythos special? Will they even wear costumes? Honestly, if you're gonna try to replicate another TV show for this, instead of gritty True Detective, I would have much preferred making it like Star Trek, which is part of why the animated series was so great. Exploring the unknown reaches of space, meeting new aliens and helping them with their troubles, all while uncovering darker secrets of the universe. We of course can't really say anything until we get a trailer or a better look at the show. Grounded has basically become a buzzword nowadays that doesn't really mean anything anymore, and it could more so be talking about taking the character and his mythos more seriously and being a little bit darker with it, which could really be interesting. Sort of like Green Lantern Earth 1 by Gabriel Hardman and Cornet Bechko, which was a really different but still cool take on the mythology by making it more hard sci-fi. They're using a lot of the art to showcase this pitch, so they're probably going to pull from it a good amount. And based on how showrunner Chris Mundy is talking about it, as well as Purna Jagannathan, who's on the new Daily Boys show, we might still get a lot of that cosmic stuff here despite that grounded take. But it's also kind of telling that our exclusive first look at this series is a couple of dudes standing in the street. And oh hey look, one of them has a ring. But with all of that said and all that out of the way, one thing that I already really love about the show is the casting. Starting with Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan. I really like him in everything I've seen him in, like Game Night, and he does a really good job of balancing that kind of smart-ass cool guy without going overboard with it and still keeping the sincerity that someone like Ryan Reynolds lacked. I remember when Hal was first cast, a lot of people were up in arms about his age. Chandler is 59, which is a little bit more seasoned than you would expect Hal at the start of this new universe, but personally, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Firstly, the dude still looks the part, and I think it's a little weird to always be hyper fixating on an actor's age like that. It's not like he's geriatric or anything. And also, I honestly like being thrown into this world with everybody already existing and having a past. It allows us to just get to the good part instead of having to build everything up from scratch. And more importantly, I think it could be really interesting if this first generation, like Hal Jordan and Barry Allen, could have their own sort of Silver Age era that could be explored in other media like games or shows. James Gunn has said that the DCU is going to be more like Star Wars than Marvel with how they approach their stories. More standalone projects jumping around timelines and important key events, instead of everything having to be one long TV show you have to keep up with. So it might be cool if there's a whole sub-series of movies and shows for those characters, as well as like a younger Batman. The only issue I could see with Hal's age would have to do with Green Arrow and that relationship. If Hal is in his 50s, does that mean that one of his best friends, Oliver Queen, is the same? It could be fun to see a more refined Oliver, like in Mike Grell's run with the Longbow Hunters, but at the same time, selfishly, I want Oliver to be a main player in this new universe, and I feel like that's only going to happen if he's like 29. I'm also a little bit worried they're going to adapt Emerald Twilight and make the big twist of the season that Hal goes crazy and is possessed by Parallax, which is, spoilers for that one bad Green Lantern animated movie that came out a couple years ago, what that one bad Green Lantern animated movie that came out a couple years ago did. So yeah, maybe just stay away from that. But that brings us to the other main casting. Aaron Pierre is Jon Stewart, which I also really love. Pierre is a fantastic actor, like with his work on Rebel Ridge or his Grammy-winning artist Midsize Sedan. One thing I've noticed a lot with Jon Stewart as of late is that Jon always tends to get put into a box. He gets flanderized as the soldier, and his entire personality revolves around his time in the military, when that's a bit of an oversimplification. Jon, first and foremost, is an architect. It's part of what made his creation by Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams so special. At the time, in the 70s, it wasn't very common for black characters to have a college education. And not to mention, Neil Adams had to fight with DC editorial to allow the character to be dark-skinned, and go against industry norms to print the books with new tones of brown. And so it's really frustrated that a lot of that gets ignored in service of just making him the military guy. If anything, I think it could be really interesting if his story has to do with how war and violence changed him as a person. Maybe how in the military he lost a lot of his individuality and creative drive as an architect, and being a Green Lantern helps him get some of that back. They got rid of his drip though. That's fucked up. I feel like the show is going to open with Jon getting the Lantern Ring and being our sort of POV character to the world. I don't want to see Hal Jordan's origin again, but I do think, in a similar vein to the X-Men, the Green Lantern mythos needs that audience surrogate to explain a lot of the complexities and get the ball rolling. I'm really interested in how this buddy cop dynamic is going to work. Traditionally in that genre, you have your older and more no-nonsense veteran, and then your younger, funny rookie character. And the older one tends to be a bit more of the straight man to the other, like in something like Men in Black. But Hal Jordan traditionally tends to be that sort of funnier smartass with the problem with authority. And while he's not a stick in the mud or anything, Jon isn't really like a Will Smith quippy type of character. So it could be neat to sort of flip that on its head and have the older one be the fun one who helps Jon loosen up a bit. One thing I'm really hoping for is that we'll see the other lanterns aside from just Hal and Jon. The Green Lantern Corps and their base on Oa is one of the most iconic and defining aspects of the Lantern mythos. The idea that there are thousands and thousands of lanterns, all with the same job as our main hero, flying around the galaxy, protecting their sector, is so much fun and broadens the world of DC to more than just Earth and Krypton. There's a sense of camaraderie to it, and I hope that they're portrayed as more than just space cops or space military. We know that Nathan Fillion is playing Guy Gardner in the Superman movie, with his glorious and hideous bowl cut. I feel like it's obvious Guy will at least have a small role in the show, but that's probably it for the Human Lantern, since it might be a bit too early for Kyle or Simon or Jessica. You have the original Green Lantern, Alan Scott, from the Golden Age, but he's kind of in a world all on his own. Literally, he's on Earth too, but he's also more based in magic than anything to do with space. But if they're able to find a way to tie him into it, it could be really fun, since he's a great character and I love what he kind of represents now. But I also want to see some of the weirder alien ones, like Kilowog or Tomar Ray. Or it might be fun if they have to stay undercover on Earth, and so the only other Lantern who can help them is Chip, pretending to be a squirrel. I also need to see Mogo. I don't care what it takes, I don't care about the budget, or if it's too silly for your grounded or realistic show. Make it happen. If they really want to pull from True Detective, one thing that I think could be really cool is if each season of the show has a different duo in the lead. This season is Hal and Jon, but maybe season 2 is Guy and Kyle. And season 3 is Jessica and Simon. Season 4 could even pull from Far Sector by N.K. Jemisin and Jamal Campbell, and introduce Joel Mullane and have it entirely off-world the whole time. Or bring in Razor from the animated series. Each season could basically be its own little standalone mystery with new main characters. You could still have Hal and Jon return either in Justice League stuff or as supporting roles for later seasons or in animated stuff, and it could be a really fun and fresh long-term vision for the show and allow us to explore such a big, complex world. But all right. What's the point of talking anything superhero or comic book related if we're not going to talk about the most important part? I'm talking about, of course, the costumes, baby! Back when the 2011 movie came out, probably the biggest backlash came from the costume. Specifically how the costume was entirely CGI, including the mask. Which is funny, because nowadays, everybody and their mom has a CGI superhero costume. Hell, they'll make real practical costumes and then CGI over them just for the love of the game. The reason why 2011s look so egregiously bad, though, was because, just like all bad VFX, of poor planning and mistreatment of the animators. The suit wasn't fully designed ahead of time. The VFX animators often had to rely on animating over footage by hand instead of using proper motion capture. sculpture, especially for the face, which is so expressive and has so many complex muscles working together, which also didn't allow for much improvisation or reshoots. At best, it led to floating head syndrome, and at worst, yeah. But the response to the CGI suit was so bad that I can only imagine they're gonna go more practical this time around, which is kind of a blessing in disguise. I think it could be really fun if Hal has a bit more of a classic traditional superhero costume to highlight his time as that Silver Age hero. Like give him the domino mask and especially the white gloves. I love the white gloves on him so much, and in so many modern Hal Jordan designs just ignore them, but they're so fun and so important. They're so cool. And then John's can be a bit more modern and maybe has some more armor to differentiate itself. One thing that I've always wanted to see for a Green Lantern suit is to have it be like a black bodysuit, and then the green is literally projected on top and sort of translucent like the rest of the constructs, since the costume is nothing more than an armor created by the ring. That could be a fun way to sort of mix practical suits with VFX without risking the panic that a fully CGI costume would cause. I don't really know if I'm explaining it very well. In my head, it looks very cool. Don't worry. Now, will these two even wear your traditional Green Lantern suits? I honestly don't know. That might go against the gritty pitch, and they might be scared to do anything costume related because of the movie. But I'm hoping we at least get a little bit of it, you know? With the whole True Detective angle, a lot of it is going to be riding on the mystery of this show. Clearly, it's going to be something directly related to the Lanterns and the Corps, which is why it's specifically Hal and John's job to stay on Earth and solve it. And I'm going to guess it's some kind of murder whodunit that we have to figure out. It could be just an alien gets killed and they have to solve it, but it would have to be a pretty big deal, so it could be the death of another Lantern, or maybe even one of the Guardians, which would definitely be big enough to warrant this kind of investigation. Like, how did they die? Why were they even on Earth and all that? It could be really cool if they pull from Darwin Cook's New Frontier and have the Center involved somehow. That book is easily one of my favorite comics ever made, and Gunn has talked about it being a big inspiration for the DCU. The Humphreys run with Jessica and Simon was about Atrocitus attacking Earth, so they could pull some ideas from there, which could be a good way to differentiate from the movie and show off a bit more of the universe. It's what the animated series did early on. And then there's, of course, the most famous Green Lantern villain, Sinestro, played by Ulrich Thompson. And that casting and his inclusion makes me optimistic that the show isn't going to be shying away from the rest of the Alien cast, and is willing to include someone like an evil pink elf man. Like I said before, Mark Strong was perfect casting for the 2011 movie, but he didn't really get much of a spotlight or anything to do before just a random credit scene showing him turn yellow. But Sinestro is one of the most important characters to the Lantern's mythos. He's someone who, at his best, adds so many layers to what it means to be Green Lantern. Either a corrupt bad cop who goes too far and has to be stopped, or better yet, a way to showcase the inherent flaws in the system that the Guardians have created. Someone who sees the failings of this institution, but goes too far in the solution and doesn't see the fine line between order and dictatorship. I'm curious if they're going to just start the show with him already a Yellow Lantern, or if we're going to see his descent into villainy. Part of me wants to just already have that set up, but I also really love seeing that character arc and his eventual betrayal of the Corps. Maybe as part of the mystery, they discover some yellow mineral that eventually becomes the basis for the Sinestro Corps rings. It wouldn't be much of a mystery though, since, big surprise, the guy named Sinestro turned out to be pretty sinister. Although now that I think about it, neither would a guy named Atrocitus. So one thing I really hope with Sinestro and the rest of the Yellow Lanterns is to really lean into the fear angle. It would be cool to showcase that visually, and the show turns into a bit of a cosmic horror at times. The basis for what Green Lantern represents is overcoming fear, and it could be really fun to show that off by actually making the show scary for parts of it. Or maybe the whole show is just tracking down Batman, who paints an entire room yellow and drinks lemonade while Robin throat punches Hal. Now there's a TV show right there. If you ask me, the world of DC has 4 main circles: street level, metahuman, magic, and cosmic. There are characters like the Flash and Superman and Wonder Woman who kind of dip their toes in a couple at once, but Green Lantern is the cornerstone and the heart of the cosmic side of DC. They're the front lines to the rest of the universe before it gets to the heroes of Earth. So much of their mythos defines the rest of what DC is, and yet hasn't really been touched in adaptations outside of the animated series. That show is so special to me because even with only 2 seasons, it had the space to breathe and show off so many different corners of the universe, something that wouldn't be possible in the runtime of a 2-hour movie. And so now with this new series, I'm hoping that we'll get a chance to do the same. I want to see the other Lanterns and the rest of the emotional spectrum. I talked about Sinestro and Atrocitus, but there's also Peace Walker with the Blue Lanterns, the Indigo Tribe, the Star Sapphires, Larfleeze, and maybe even the Black and White Lanterns. If you ask me, it was the introduction of these worlds and these ideas that expanded the Green Lantern character to new heights and revolutionized those stories. And so with Green Lantern basically being culturally blacklisted for so many years, this is the perfect opportunity to show off what makes him so special, to use the spotlight that the character has deserved for so long and finally do him justice. Green Lantern isn't just about flying around with a cool ring and a CGI mask. It's about the power of will, about taking action and pushing forward no matter what. Green Lanterns aren't chosen because they're perfect or because they're fearless, but because they feel fear and they refuse to let it control them. And in a world of gods and aliens and monsters and the horrors of the universe, they represent that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the strength to stand tall in the face of it, whether that be in brightest day or blackest night. But what do you want to see from the new Lanterns show? Do you think the true detective angle is going to be going too far, or are you still excited for it? If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Zingy, Star, Aiden Huxley Anderson, Max Meal, Rylan Archuleta, Radiant, Monty Boy, Leah Mia, Riley Martin, Doug is here sadly, Ooey Gooey, Val, Heavy Metal Potato, Danny Boy, and Rupel for joining as spectacular fanboys on my Patreon and channel members. This has been TroyBoy17. Be responsible, and I'll see you around.